Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Healthcare Education Transformation Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. F. Scott Feil, and I've got with me today very special guest, Dr. Heidi Jannenga. Heidi is one of the founders of WebPT, but there's so much more going on here, and I can't wait to dive into all of it. Heidi, tell us a little bit about your academic journey and how it's led you to where you are today.
Wow. Well, it has to take me back quite a few years as I pursued actually a degree in biology. I was actually pre-med when I entered UC Davis post high school. I was lucky enough to get a basketball scholarship that led me to UC Davis, one of the premier medical schools in the country, which was part of the reason that I decided to go there. And along that journey, my junior year, I went down with a knee injury. It was inconclusive on whether or not I had torn my ACL. And so they sent me to see a physical therapist after, I had been diagnosed and exhausted the training room opportunity. So that was my first experience with PT. And I worked really hard with my therapist, and uh, she helped me get back to being able to play that year with a brace, and then worked hard over the summer and was able to play my senior year with no brace, set a few records along the way in scoring. And so I was enamored with what had been accomplished, and looked into the educational pursuit of becoming a physical therapist, and sort of changed my trajectory from there. Went on to uh, apply to PT school, did not get in my first year, and decided to take a few more courses, and actually was going on, went through a PTA program to start getting some of the prerequisites and other things just to kind of get in line with the profession. Luckily, my second year, I did get in. And I was part of the inaugural class of the Institute of Physical Therapy, which is now called University of St. Augustine. The inaugural blue class for any of the USA grads out there. Yeah, at that point in time, it was just a master's program. So I got my master's in physical therapy. And then quite a few years later, as the industry transitioned to DPT, I got my doctorate of physical therapy through Evidence in Motion with their program that is kind of a MBA slash DPT, which was more in line with what I was doing at that point in my career. But yeah, it's been a interesting journey, and you know, not linear by any means, which I know is
We,
really
yeah,
what
we,
we talk about.
Right. We love that story because again, I was an English major before I was a PT. So, and I didn't get into PT school my first time either. So is, it doesn't have to look linear in order for it to work, right? You just got to get things done and kind of check the boxes. And then all of a sudden you're on the other side doing things you love to do? So you start, in the PT world,
Yeah.
and then you've kind of taken a different trajectory now, and we've kind of gone more business and tech direction. Tell us a little bit about that adventure.
Well, I worked as a physical therapist. I knew I wanted to be an outpatient in sports medicine, and that's what I did. I worked actually in an outpatient practice. It led me to Arizona, where I still live today. I graduated, from St. Augustine in Florida, where actually is where I grew up. That was one of the incentives to be closer to home when I went through PT school. I did all of my affiliations all over the country, which was really a unique experience, which I just highly recommend to a lot of students who just you're in this moment in time in your life where you can do this. You can travel if you have this opportunity to do that. Um, Go try it, learn different things, right? So it led me to Arizona, where I worked in an outpatient practice that actually did a lot of workman's comp as well as some sports. And because that was my interest, they were willing to invest in me to help grow that part of the business. Um, and within a couple of years, I was asked to start a clinic inside of a junior college. Um, and got to work with athletic trainers, with all of the orthopedic surgeons and physicians associated with the college. And that was a really, interesting experience. I'd only been out of PT school for 2 years, but my interest in clinical sort of knowledge really helped to draw me into that position and say yes to something that maybe I wasn't 100% qualified for, but yet I had the interest and the passion to pursue that. It was very successful in growing that small clinic that grew quite a bit bigger, and then got interested, and started having other opportunities with some professional teams, and then got tapped by a clinic director, regional director with physiotherapy associates at the time, to join their practice, which was one of the largest sports medicine PT practices in the country. So I ended up working there for a little over 12 years. After a few years, I moved into a clinic director position, which is really where sort of my business side of PT started to really attract more interest, because I had to know a part of the physical therapy practice that really I didn't have any education in, formal education from PT school. Like, we just, even today is, we can talk about this later, but it's a missing aspect of, in my opinion, of the DPT programs. But had a great mentor, trial by fire again, of just really diving in and learning, and then having a larger organization that provided some of that education to their clinic directors. And then, after a few years or 10 years or so, of going through this and reimbursements continuing to decline and really understanding my P&L responsibilities, started dating a software engineer. And one of our largest expenses was transcription and dictation. And you have to take yourself back to 2006-ish timeframe. 80% of therapists were documenting on pen and paper, like the whole
Yep.
EMR explosion hadn't happened yet. And so we put our heads together to try to mitigate the cost of transcription and dictation by creating a documentation platform for the therapists in my practice. And we had about 12 therapists in our practice. And so we did that, started iterating on it. I was the PT in WebPT, which is what we called it, and was getting positive feedback. And then within about 6 or 8 months of iterating, we then, asked a few of my colleagues in the greater Phoenix area to say, hey, we came up with this thing, like, and they started asking me, hey, what are you doing over there? We heard some really positive things. And so we, by another 6 months, we had those 10 other practices up and running. And that's when we really did the market research and figured out, hey, this is not just an issue with us in this organization, but this is something ubiquitous with the entire industry. The High Tech Act had just been passed, so we kind of saw where things were potentially going. And so in 2008, we launched WebPT, and now, 17 years, almost 17 years later, we have the largest market share of any EMR, and have stayed true to what we call the rehab therapy industry, which is PT, OT, and speech, which just naturally kind of come together as you get into larger practices who are have all three disciplines represented for their patients.
Yeah, what a story, what a journey. I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. I think, one of the first things is you had a lot of trial by fire in there, right? Like, not totally ready, maybe not totally competent for all these things, but just the belief that, yeah, I can figure it out. I can do it. That to me is huge, because I teach the business and admin course, right? I still, that's the only course I still teach, and it does need help. I'm not going to lie. But I try to, when I teach it, I try to give the basics that they need to know and the 1% that might show up on the NPTE, but then the real life stuff too that goes behind, what it looks like. Because even if you don't own and run your own PT practice or business, you still need to understand the business of healthcare, right? You need to understand P&L, right? Profit and loss sheets. You need to understand how you get paid or reimbursed, if you will. You need to understand how different settings pay differently and how it can, payment structures look, how to negotiate a contract, how to look for red flags, how to, be able to understand the business aspect of healthcare. So what was kind of like the thought process or the trigger that kind of happened where you were like, yeah, I think I need to, go the business route a little bit here. Like, how do you make that shift and really the mindset change to take a lot of the skills that you already had and learned, even by if it was trial by fire, and then apply it to like, yeah, I'm going a little bit more business direction.
Well, I'll just say to start in the business direction, like a lot of the skill sets and values of a typical physical therapist, we care, we love to collaborate. We have an analytical mind, we're problem solvers. Like all of those things are immediately transferable to a good business person. And that was not intuitive to me at first. But when you start to have success in an area that you frankly didn't really consider yourself a business person, you start to reflect on, well, and you get asked a lot, like, what is your secret sauce? Like, why are you being successful in this area? And as I started to reflect on that, it really is a lot of the relationship building, the things that we do on a regular basis as physical therapists, especially the problem solving and assessing what the issues are and then coming up with a plan. Like you can apply a soap note to a lot of business issues, right? If it's almost like a formula. They call it something different in business, but essentially it's the same thing. And so once I sort of grasped that, and it was just really naturally happening, but um, the ability to solve problems is what people want in business. Now, what we recognized as a lot of the knowledge that I gained in specifics around P&L and the business aspect was through mentorship. Partnering with the director that I took his position, he moved up to a regional director, um, and working, carving out extra time to just sit down and understand that kind of thing. I also took some initiative to take some other courses on the side. Harvard Business Review has a lot of really interesting coursework that you can take around just doing a startup business or learning how to understand the accounting side, which is even to this day is not my strength, but I understand.
Yeah.
Philosophically, it's not something I want to do every day, but I understand it. And so, um, you know, I'd say that about believing in yourself is like you have the skill set. It's really now doing it with a different sort of language. We have a nomenclature in PT. Someone tries to come in and learn what it means to be a PT. A lot of it has to do with the nomenclature, the languages. I mean, we laugh about all of the abbreviations that we have, right?
Yeah.
For things. It's no different in another industry, but it just takes a little bit of time and confidence to say, hey, this is really important to me to want to learn. But as we started WebPT, that was also identified early on by us of just the lack of training and understanding within, as you pointed out, healthcare in general, but more specifically to our audience, which was PT. And so that became really at the beginning of WebPT, this additional component to our business of teaching the business of PT. How do you get paid? How do you maximize your ability to get paid for each visit? What are CPT codes? How are they used? How do you get your claims paid faster, right? What are some things that you could do? Best documentation practices? Like all of these things were not necessarily being taught, and it was no wonder that we were struggling on the reimbursement side, or even in our negotiation with insurance companies or, others to try to make sure that from an advocacy standpoint, that people could really understand our value and why we should be getting paid more and not continue to be cut. Like we still struggle with this today,
Yeah.
but I think there's more understanding of the business side now. And there has to be, right?
Yeah.
Margins have significantly gone down. Like efficiency in your business practice is critical to run a successful business.
Yeah, I mean, again, so many good points there. And I think, the first one that I really took from all that was a belief, right? A belief in yourself, a belief that you can do this, a belief that I've learned a lot of the things I need to know just going through a difficult DPT program and a graduate program, right? Those skills are transferable to many, many other things, not just business, but life in general. You learn a lot of really good skills, whether you know it or not, and depending on what you want to call them in whatever setting you're in. But those skill sets are there and they don't go away, right? You just keep stacking these skill sets and eventually you get pretty good at whatever the thing is. But you also mentioned too, like, this is important to me and I'm passionate about it. And that to me is one of the biggest driver for successful businesses is you have to have a vision, but then you also have to have the passion and the love for it. Otherwise, when it gets difficult, and it will get difficult inevitably, you're just going to bow out, right? You're going to cut bait and lose, just walk away. And that doesn't jive with a successful business and a successful business owner, right? You've got to continue down that path because it's so much more important and it's so much bigger than just you. It's all the people that you're helping and all the people that you're going to help that you may not even know from like the trickle down effect, right? So it has to be a passion. It has to be a true love. And then we need to figure out the multifactorial issue of the why behind what we're doing, right? Like I could create a thing, a widget or whatever, and yeah, that's great. But like, does it really matter? Is there an impact, right? With all the issues we have going on right now between advocacy, between policy, between reimbursement cuts and new grads coming out with 150, $200,000 worth of student loan debt and only getting paid 65, 75,000 out of the gate. Those numbers, that math ain't math and it's not going to work.
Right.
So we have a lot of issues to address, and it's going to take a lot of players to get it on the same page and on board to start addressing them collaboratively. And I think that becomes, to me, that's why most of my time goes towards the APTA's private practice section, because I feel like business owners and entrepreneurs are just that. We're the problem solvers. We're the ones that are going to try to figure some of this stuff out. A lot of times because we have to, right? Nobody's coming to save us. It's just us. We got to figure it out. So let me
Yep.
ask this.
Yeah,
You've been
it's
in, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I'm curious because you mentioned you've been, in business now with WebPT for 17 plus years, right? Over the time, you've had mentorship, you've had opportunity to grow, you've had these learning bouts, right, along the way. At this point, you're pretty high on the ladder as far as like business operations and the way things work. What do you think is the thought process or what goes through your mind now as a high level exec versus when you're just starting out as a business owner and trying to figure things out? Like how do you think about thinking, like metacognition type stuff and thought processing? Because that to me is one of the things we should all be striving to master.
Yeah, that's I am just a consummate learner. That is
Mm.
part of my ethos is I'm always one to be asking questions and wanting to expand my ability to learn. And so I'll just say, people ask all the time, like, wow, it's been 17 years. Most entrepreneurs don't stick around with a company for this long. Especially if you look at our path of having, done some fundraising along the way where we were startup and then we were venture backed and then we were private equity backed. And we went from 2 employees to now having, 1,000 employees, like that pathway of learning. And just because you started the business doesn't mean that you know how to run a business with 1,000 employees. Like it is so much different. There's so many different facets and components along this path and journey that is expanded, sometimes blown my mind in terms of like what it's going to take and what are the differences. I'll just say there's a constant throughout, which is the foundation of values and that passion and beliefs that you mentioned. As you start a business, it's really about setting that mission and the purpose and the vision. And so staying true to that has been what has allowed me to continue to really want to expand and learn and be a part of it along this pathway. Um, and now it's like you have so many differentiation factors or uh, example data at our fingertips that we can make an even bigger impact, a bigger difference. That to me is always what has been driving us. It's the impact that you're able to have on people initially, and now it's the profession as a whole. So you keep expanding your ability to impact. And so that's the driver. And looking at like all of the parts and pieces, and then surrounding yourself with folks that are also in this visionary, like understanding the problem solving sort of pathway of what are things that we can do with this data, just as an example, to really make an impact. How have others in other industries done something similar that we could perhaps replicate, or at least use that? Like it's not always about reinventing the wheel. I think that's something that, sometimes you think you've got to have the next best, or not next best, but actually the newest, coolest thing. Well, it's not always that, right? There are now with AI, there's tools and things that are available that weren't available to us 10 years. So how do we utilize those tools to maximize, again, our impact and the value and benefit that we're offering to not only our customers, but also the industry as a whole?
Yeah, I mean, lifelong learning, right?
Answer your question, but
Yeah,
that's
yeah, absolutely. Lifelong learning is something that we kind of sign up for when we start, PT school, right? We kind of pledge that we're going to keep learning even beyond. And once you graduate and you get that DPT degree and you get that license to practice, to me, that's really just the bus ticket to get on to start your journey. You're just getting started at that point, even though it feels like, oh, it was hard and I made it. Well,
yeah,
great. Now you got to keep learning, right? You got to keep going.
yeah,
So I think that's huge. And I love the fact that again, the driver is impact, right? How can I make the most impact? And it may start small in my clinic. How can I make the most impact, for my patients? And then it's a little bit bigger. Oh, how can I make the most impact for my business? And then how can I make the most impact for the profession? And eventually you just keep going until you're hitting that point of making the most impact?
right. Well, and I just want to say that I don't think that everyone has to dream and want to do
Yeah.
is the things that, the big giant things. I think that it's so important for people to want to have that impact one patient at a time. And it's meaningful. Like I think sometimes people get lost. It's like when you vote, like, well, does my vote really count? I'm one out of, millions of votes. Well, yes, your vote counts, right? And that patient that you have in front of you and the interaction that you have is important. Every time you do that, it's critical, right? You are creating impact with that patient, but you're also setting you in a relationship, but also a brand awareness. You're a brand ambassador for our profession as a whole. And if people go away with a sour taste in their mouth, well, maybe they never return to PT at all. And that's such a shame, right? And so anyway, I just want to, kind of level set with everybody. Like, yes, I've been blessed enough to have so much impact and have worked really hard to create something amazing and have had a lot of success. But it started with a want to give back to and become something, a person, a provider, because of that person that had such an impact on me, right? I wanted to pay that forward, and be able to have that same impact with patients because I had such success. right? And that's what I want to emphasize. Like that's the power of impact, even at an individual level, that can now transform into something like we've been able to do to influence an entire industry.
Yeah. Yeah. So, so good because yeah, you affect that patient, but like you said, you're also affecting their family members and caregivers and other people involved. And then that trickles down to, oh, I had a great experience. Go check out this PT. And then the profession benefits from it. So, it really is a ripple effect. And I think that it is important to recognize. And again, not everybody's a business owner. Not everybody's meant to be an entrepreneur, and that's fine. You don't have to be. You just have to find the best route for you to make the most impact that you possibly can, and continue striving to do the best you can at that thing. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Um, so let's talk about the success a little bit and the amazing opportunities you've had now because of the impact and the success. What's coming down the line now for you? You've got a couple other interesting opportunities. I know the foundation is one. Let's talk about the next steps now.
Yeah, I joke with people now. I'm a big Taylor Swift fan, so I'm in my give back era.
Same. Yeah.
You're
We
a Swift too,
yep,
nice.
yep. We the kids drive to school every morning bopping to Taylor Swift, so we are Swifties in this household.
Yes, I am a girl mom. I've got a 13-year-old daughter and then twin 19-year-olds through a blended family, my bonus daughters, who are now freshmen in college. So yeah, we're big fans, but you know, I've had a successful career. It was a huge transition back in 2011 when I went away from patient care after practicing for about 15 years. It's funny now I'm kind of in this middle range where I practiced like actually, hands-on with patients for 15 years and now WebPT, and there's some overlap. So I'm not that old, but it's been almost 15 years now in non-clinical practice. Um, but the transition away from clinical practice was one of the most difficult things that I've had to experience in my professional career, mainly because it was so much a part of the identity of who. And I know this is something that a lot of us feel like even today, though, like even though I'm non-clinical, like when someone asks me what do you do, the first thing that still comes out of my mouth, I'm a physical
Yeah,
therapist who happened to start in a technology company, right?
yeah,
And so having that part of your identity and making this transition, but that's when those connecting the dots of, man, all of these things I've learned is really transferable to building a tech company and as a startup, and the culture of the business and all of that were immediately transferable. So now that I've been doing this and have had some financial success, but also really truly understanding how to, the secret sauce of building a great business, um, I set aside a small amount of money to start this foundation, which I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do initially back in 2020. And then when the country got rocked with George Floyd, and also, that was kind of the last straw, but we do something we call our state of rehab therapy report, WebPT does annually. And something that we've been asking is just, the demographics, ethnicity, like who's part of the profession. And I know, APTA has been talking about it for quite a while and the lack of diversity within our profession, but seeing that stat over, 8 years, not changing much. I mean, maybe a few percentage points, if that. Um, Despite, a lot of positive efforts from schools and APTA and others, I just, that was the thing that I was going to try to tackle. It was the problem that I wanted to now try to solve. And as I did the research, as you dive into the problem, one of the biggest issues, not only for diverse candidates, for everyone, but in particular for diverse candidates, is the cost of education. This lack of sense of belonging, because they are sometimes the only minority student in their class. And then also just, I mean, a lot of students also are first generation college students. And so there's not this support structure behind them, education of even knowing how to navigate graduate school, or you know, what does it mean to sign up for student loans and that kind of thing. So all of these sort of put together was the impetus to start Rising Tide with a Z. One of my just favorite quotes of all time was JFK's quote of "A rising tide raises all boats," and so that was kind of the foundation of what we're trying to accomplish with the foundation. And so we are a scholarship program specifically to support DPT students from underrepresented backgrounds getting their DPT degree, as well as residency students who are going on to specialize. And so we offer 23 scholarships per year, 20 on the DPT side, and 3 scholarships for residency program or residency students per year. And yeah, we're now in our 4th year. We just announced our latest group of 20 scholars. And we will announce here at the end of this month, we're right in the middle of the cycle of going through our scholarship for our residency programs or residency students. But we're not just check writers, right? We wrap them up with a lot of educational enrichment. We actually just came off of our North Star Summit, as we call it, where we bring all of our scholars here to Phoenix. And we have a big dinner at my home, and then we do a full day of educational presentations and things. But it's not things that they're going to be repetitive with PT school, right? These are how do you or how do you do write your resume? Like how do you how do you negotiate salaries, right? It's like all of the little intangible things that we may take for granted of having this knowledge, but you know, this is all new to a lot of them. So it's been an amazing process. We're 100% graduation rate at the moment. Our first fleet, as we call them, have graduated now. So yeah, it's taking a lot of my attention, but also a big part of my heart.
Yeah, that's awesome. Amazing work. I love it. Can't wait to hear from some of these folks and, their story and their journey because again, it's impact, right? It's you doing your thing to then help the next generation to hopefully then go out and help the next generation too. So the give back factor is huge. I've got one final kind of question before we get into the heavy stuff, but like what would you recommend for somebody who is, maybe in school about to finish or been out for a few years and it is considering maybe, starting a business or just going a little bit different path? Like, what's some of your best recommendations for somebody who might be interested in that?
Well, I think if you're gonna stay in the physical therapy world, I really think it's important to become a great clinician. Um, or understand, what it means to be in clinical practice. And it doesn't matter whether it's, in a hospital system or, outpatient or home health, like the relationship building and the interaction with patients and what that is like is just, I think it's critical to understand before anything else, like what it means to be a physical therapist, right? Um, and then once you sort of grasp and have that clinical knowledge, it's then adding on the business side of how do I get paid? All the questions you said earlier. How do I get paid? Why am I checking these boxes or entering my CPT codes? Like, what is the pathway of a claim? Like, how does that even work to actually come back? Like, what is a fee schedule? Like all of these sort of basic business acumen things that most physical therapists probably couldn't answer unless you've had some sort of business courses or mentorship along those lines. And then, you know, I do a lot of mentorship with entrepreneurs. And the biggest thing that we talk about in the beginning is identifying a problem and then finding a unique solution that absolutely has to resonate with your target market or target customer. And then the second thing is always about narrowing your focus on the problem, to not try to solve the entire problem, but really focus on a small segment of who you're eventually trying to penetrate, right? And focusing on that sort of niche to get everything started and to make sure you have right product market fit and all of the things that, you know, it takes in the beginning to make sure you've got good traction and the ability to continue to grow.
Yeah, I love that. Sage, wise advice from somebody who's done it very well. Well, Heidi, thank you so much for taking the time to be on here. We ask all of our guests this one final question, and that question is, if you could change one aspect of higher education, whether it be DPT or otherwise, what aspect would you change and how would you change it?
Well, we've been talking about it this entire episode. I really think that there should be um, at least a quarter or a semester of the business side of PT that is part of the DPT curriculum. It is just such a critical component, and I think that there is, especially in this generation, a negative attitude towards profit and capitalism. And without business, this world would not go around. And so this disconnect of how you actually can become more successful, and most people will define part of their success is making money. And so there's a disconnect in how you're able to accomplish that. And so really driving home, I'm a huge proponent of conscious capitalism, which is something people can go look up. It's consciouscapitalism.org. Been a part of that group for a really long time. And so it's just the business side and understanding really how business can actually be a power for good is really important.
Yeah, you've got my vote. I mean, I use the Professor Profit as the handle for my masterclass, so I'm good with that. I'm all behind that. Because yeah, profit isn't a bad thing, right? Especially if it can be used for good, because the more you make, the more you can give, right? The more opportunities you have to do pro bono work, to give scholarships and do things that are impactful and important to you. You know, because my whole dissertation was on service-based learning, and I think it's a great fit, especially for physical therapy. But over time, I get more busy and my time becomes more and more valuable, and I just don't have as much of it. So if I have more funds and resources, I can still give to the places I feel like are worthy of, giving more money to. So it's like you have to make the money though in order to be able to give it, So we have to understand that.
It makes you a better advocate. You know exactly why you're advocating for things and what you're advocating
Yeah.
for. And it's not just about getting paid more, but that is a critical part of it
Yeah.
to make sure we're getting credit for the value that we're providing, right?
Yeah, at some point there's a bottom level to what we can do to keep the lights on and open the doors and like pay everybody the things. So like there is a bottom line, like any way you look at it. And if we're not making that bottom line, doesn't matter what our value is, we're not being reimbursed for the amount that we need to even just keep the doors open. So we can't even show people the value if we can't do the bare minimums.
Mm.
So, well, Heidi, again, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your experience and your story with our audience. Where can people reach out to you or find you if they just have more questions or want to see what you're up to with WebPT or the foundation? Just so that people can kind of learn more about this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So LinkedIn is probably the best way you can contact me directly. So it's just Heidi Jannenga on LinkedIn. If you'd like to learn more about Rising Tide, it's RIZING-tide, TIDE.com. And of course, WebPT.com for anybody interested. We have a lot of new great products and features that we'd love to show you.
Awesome. We'll put all those links in the show notes so it's easy for everyone to find. Heidi, thank you so much. Been an absolute pleasure chatting with you today.
Thanks, Scott. Really appreciate everything you're doing for the profession.